One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April 4, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566, with different sources providing different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this: the inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while, and some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again: orbs and crosses fighting a giant arrow and bizarre tubes, crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us. But don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet, but the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or left of the sun or even on both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright it looks like there are two additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird-looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the Galactic Empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with two blood-colored half-round strokes like the diminishing moon right through the sun. In the sun, above, under, and on both sides stood blood-colored and partly bluish or iron-colored, also black-colored, round orbs. Now, here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it and a red orb. If we have at least one red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms, so depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. Indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for that fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation, or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments. According to the theory of panspermia, life could have been brought to Earth by a meteorite, comet, or asteroid from a different region of space. At the moment, this idea remains purely theoretical, but let's figure out if it could actually turn out to be true. Traditionally, exobiologists, those who are focused on searching for life outside Earth, have been trying to explore the possibility of life on Mars or in the subsurface oceans of Saturn's and Jupiter's icy moons. But simple life could be much more widespread. It could be drifting through interplanetary space right now in the form of dormant bacteria and spores. Several scientists have noted that the ultra-harsh environment of space is likely to severely damage the DNA and RNA of such spores and microorganisms. Others believe that since enough microbes could be traveling in a dust cloud, some of them could survive in their original form. There are several types of panspermia. For example, lithopanspermia proposes that some kind of microbic life could exist in debris blasted into the cosmos after planetary collisions with comets and asteroids. Radiopanspermia claims that organisms might be able to travel through space with the help of radiation coming from stars, but in this case, it's unclear how the effect of dangerous ultraviolet and X-ray radiation combined with the vacuum of space doesn't totally destroy microorganisms. There's also pseudopanspermia, according to which organic building blocks of life appear in interstellar clouds of dust. They get transported to the surfaces of planets, and life starts developing there. It sounds fascinating, but is there any evidence for the panspermia theory? Well, there have been a few orbital experiments. For example, from 2008 to 2016, the samples gathered by EXPOSE, special equipment mounted outside the International Space Station and dedicated to astrobiology, were exposed to the conditions of space. After that, they were returned to Earth from the ISS. It turned out that some of them had survived those severe conditions. There was even a case when 100% of bacterial spores placed in Mars-like conditions were still capable of life. Also, some seeds survived and were later grown as plants on Earth. There have also been exhaust experiments on the US Long-Duration Exposure Facility satellite and Biopan experiments on Russian photon capsules. They have shown that with minimal protection, spores, lichens, and even minuscule animals such as tardigrades might be able to survive in space for as long as several years. A piece of the Surveyor 3 lunar lander was brought back to Earth in 1969 by the Apollo 12 mission. Shockingly, it contained an Earth bacterium that had survived unprotected for more than 2 years on the airless surface. At the same time, this bacterium could have come from laboratory contamination on arrival back on Earth. The Indian Space Research Organisation carried out a search for space microorganisms too. It was done at stratospheric altitudes via balloon flights. The results showed that living interplanetary cells existed in air samples taken from heights of above 25 miles. Normally, air from lower levels of the atmosphere can't be transported there, so this discovery seemed to prove the theory of panspermia. But in 2010, NASA atmospheric sampling before and after hurricanes proved that under certain circumstances, Earth bacteria could actually be transported very, very high into the upper levels of the atmosphere. One of the main arguments against panspermia is that if this theory were correct, all life found throughout the solar system would have a common origin and share main biochemical characteristics like genetic code. It doesn't sound plausible. Many specialists believe that only the presence of astronaut explorers on the surfaces of, let's say, Mars, Europa, or Enceladus, can properly solve the question of life in the solar system. They can compare any life forms found with Earth-type life, which can turn out to be a real test of panspermia. In any case, until probes finally find direct proof of spaceborne life, the panspermia theory will remain unproven. We could use one of the largest lasers in the world to detect alien spaceships. If aliens existed and managed to make a spacecraft as huge as Jupiter, our equipment could probably detect it using the ripples its drives would produce in spacetime. You see, an enormous spaceship is bound to produce gravitational waves while moving around. You can read about a warp drive, also called a drive-enabling space warp, in science fiction. This device distorts the shape of the space-time continuum and is one of several ways of traveling through space. It's often described as similar to hyperspace, a faster-than-light method of interstellar travel. A spaceship equipped with a warp drive can travel at speeds greater than the speed of light by many orders of magnitude. However, unlike other fictitious faster-than-light methods of travel, such as a jump drive, it doesn't permit immediate transfers between 2 points. Instead, it involves a measurable passage of time. A spacecraft using a warp drive would still interact with objects in normal space and produce gravitational waves as well. This interaction is why, if any extraterrestrial gigantic spacecraft traveled through our galaxy, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, in the US might be able to detect it. The equipment at LIGO could search for the ripples in the fabric of spacetime left by the spaceship. The bigger an object is, the larger the gravitational waves it would leave behind. Planets, neutron stars, and even black holes produce quite prominent ripples. For the first time, such space-time ripples were directly detected in 2015, and since then, scientists have been getting better at spotting gravitational waves. New calculations published in 2019 suggested that LIGO could look beyond conventional sources of space-time ripples. The authors of the study claimed that colossal alien spacecraft traveling at high speeds or pushed along by warp drives could also produce the telltale vibrations. The LIGO detector notices gravitational waves from the tiniest distortions they make in spacetime when passing through it. The observatory consists of two intersecting L-shaped detectors, each with two arms that are almost 2.5 miles long. They also have two identical laser beams inside. The experiment is designed in such a way that if a gravitational wave passes through our planet, the laser light in one arm of the detector gets compressed while the other expands. This creates a minuscule change in the relative path lengths of the beams arriving at the detector at the same time. The warpings of spacetime that even the largest gravitational waves make are barely noticeable, often the size of a few thousandths of a proton or neutron. This means that LIGO is incredibly sensitive and requires precise maintenance and calibration. To check how far this sensitivity can stretch, researchers made calculations of the smallest object that would produce clearly detectable gravitational waves on Earth. Apparently, it would still need to be pretty big to be detectable by LIGO. An alien spacecraft would need to weigh roughly the same as Jupiter, be within 326,000 light-years away from Earth, and travel at 1/10 the speed of light. Could spaceships of this scale and speed exist? It's unclear, but hopefully, scientists will be able to squeeze down the ship's size to slightly more reasonable proportions, thanks to the increasing sensitivity of gravitational wave detectors. For example, in the mid-2030s, the European Space Agency's Laser Interferometer Space Antenna, LISA, is going to be deployed. Scientists also think that advanced alien warp drives could create gravitational wave patterns distinguishable from natural sources. If detected, these alien waves could provide us with answers on how to reverse engineer the technology, all because the shape of the gravitational wave signal is dependent on the trajectory of an object. Once a first signal is detected, we could attempt to figure out the qualities of the transportation mechanism used based on the shape of the gravitational wave signal. How about I tell you that aliens might exist? I know it probably goes against everything you believe in, but there's a new model of the universe that could explain how intelligent life spreads and distributes. This model makes lots of predictions. For example, we should expect to meet another civilization at some point. It also mentions our chances of starting to get messages from aliens or even becoming an interplanetary civilization ourselves. This model also explains why we haven't met other space civilizations yet, considering the huge number of stars and galaxies in the universe. But let's go into detail. The main assumption of the model is that at one point, a civilization existing in the vastness of the cosmos can become grabby. There are two types of civilizations, quiet aliens and loud aliens. Quiet aliens don't actually try to expand, nor do they change much, and after some time, they just disappear. This might be the reason why we don't have any data about them, and all that is left to do is make speculations about their existence. But there are also loud aliens. They supposedly keep spreading really fast until they meet other space civilizations. The model calls these loud aliens grabby because they expand from their home planet at a fraction of the speed of light. They also make significant and visible changes wherever they travel, and they last for a really long time too. Why might we suppose that grabby aliens exist? Because their existence may be the most plausible explanation for why humanity appeared so early in the history of the universe. See for yourself, the current date is 13.8 billion years after the Big Bang. Small stars can burn their cosmic fuel for up to 1 trillion years, and according to the standard model of the origin of advanced life, it's more likely to appear at the end of the longest planet lifetimes. Well, grabby aliens might be to blame for our early appearance. Such civilizations could set deadlines for others. If such aliens indeed exist, they will occupy most of the observable universe really soon, and when they succeed, no other civilizations will be able to appear because all the habitable planets will already be taken. A civilization like ours, advanced but not grabby yet, could only appear early because later, it wouldn't have a chance to do so. There's another reason why the idea of grabby aliens seems plausible. Look at life on Earth. Like humans, aren't we grabby in many ways too? Species, cultures, and companies tend to expand and occupy new niches and territories as fast as they can. For example, species spreading to new territories get access to new resources and thus increase their population. Why shouldn't we expect the same behavior from extraterrestrial civilizations? The main author of this model, Robin Hanson, was also the first to introduce the idea of the Great Filter in 1996. According to the Great Filter theory, the universe is filled with countless life forms, but people haven't stumbled across any of them yet because somewhere there is a great filter. The main purpose of this filter is to stop and finish those civilizations that advance to the level of star colonization. Suppose that this idea is true. There are three possible scenarios for our civilization. The first one, we're unique because we have passed the Great Filter. Other civilizations haven't managed to make it this far. The second scenario goes like this: we're among the first potential colonizers because the conditions in space were too harsh for life forms to leave their home planets. In this case, chances are high that we'll soon encounter other civilizations. The third scenario is quite worrying. We haven't reached the level of technological development that is advanced enough for the filter to locate us. This means that we haven't passed the filter yet. In other words, the trial is still ahead, and it's a big question if we'll manage to pass it. Without knowing languages, people from different countries won't be able to communicate with one another efficiently. Now imagine if some extraterrestrial civilization sent a message to Earth. How would we figure out their intentions? Do they want to get to know us better, or is it a warning about a full-scale intrusion? It must be terribly hard to bridge the gap between us and creatures whose minds, bodies, and habitats are totally different from ours. To practice decoding potential extraterrestrial messages, an artist-led group created a mock message from the stars. It was the most alien missive the world had ever seen, even though it was written for humans by humans. It was as non-human as possible. The message was sent from Mars to Earth, and 3 observatories detected the transmission 16 minutes later. Unfortunately, so far, no one has deciphered the message, but many have been trying to do so. There are only 3 people in the world who know what the message means. One of them is the project's founder, Daniela Deese. She and 2 other co-authors created the message after consulting with scientists, poets, programmers, and philosophers from all over the world. The main challenge for them was to get rid of anthropocentricity to make the message as realistically alien as possible. So the team immediately ruled out any kind of language-based communication. Even though they now refuse to confirm or deny that the message contains text, the creators were also considering using mathematics. Yes, the fundamental concepts of this science are universal, but different cultures may represent math differently. Deese and her team struggled to compose the message for years, experiencing massive writer's block. But eventually, in 2019, the idea was formed. 3 years later, in 2022, a major breakthrough occurred when the team drew inspiration from a short story called A Sign in Space. A month before the transmission, an astronomer joined the team, adding a mathematical touch to the message to make it more universal. Since the first announcement, the project has attracted loads of puzzle lovers who started exchanging ideas, hoping to solve the mystery. Some were among the first people to extract the raw message from the ExoMars orbiter's broadcast, which was a 40-gigabyte string of numbers interwoven with the alien message. If it had been real, it would have arrived unannounced, but in this case, the signal came at a precisely scheduled time. Imagine peeling layers off an onion. That's what filtering the data segment looked like. After a week's effort, the enthusiasts received an image of 5 speckled clusters against a blank background. Speculation on the meaning of this picture began immediately. Could the message be hinting at the alien's appearance? Was it more code? Perhaps it hid some genetic secrets? One user even enlisted ChatGPT to help decipher the message. There was also a theory that the image was a star map showing the location of the alien civilization. Another suggested that the dots, resembling constellations, could be molecules, probably part of the biosignature of the foreign world. Decryption is the process of making sense of a message for which only the intended recipient has a key, making this kind of code breaking much more difficult than decoding. You need to guess the missing key, and another tricky part is where to start. Every attempt feels like a stab in the dark. You might believe that you are starting to see patterns, but you need to stop and think whether it's true or you're just projecting. The community is still trying to decode the message. At the moment, there are more than 30 ideas for how to do it. Only after that can people try to understand its full meaning. How about you? Would you like to try and take part in the process? Maybe you've got some ideas, then share them with us. Hi everyone. Today we'll be talking about the controversial music that astronauts once heard in space. A few years ago, NASA made public the recording of a bizarre music that the astronauts from Apollo 10 reported hearing in May 1969 while they were flying over the far side of the Moon. At that moment, they were out of radio contact with Earth. This happened months before the first astronaut set foot on the lunar surface. There were 3 people on board: Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. The sounds lasted for about an hour. The astronauts managed to record them and transmit them to Mission Control in Houston. Now, I want you to listen to these whistling sounds. Doesn't it even sound outer spacey? You hear that whistling sound? Doesn't it resemble some kind of otherworldly, outer space music? So the question is, could the astronauts have heard alien music coming from outer space? Well, there's a more straightforward, non-alien explanation for this cosmic phenomenon, but we'll talk about it a bit later. In the audio recording from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Eugene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, can be heard asking John Young, piloting the command module, if he could hear that whistling sound. Cernan was the first one to call these sounds music and to add that they were kind of outer spacey. Later, when the 2 astronauts asked Tom Stafford, who was in the lunar module with Cernan, if he could hear the sounds too, he confirmed it and stated that they were really weird. Young suggested they should find out more about them, adding, "Nobody will believe us." Apollo 10 was a mission that paved the way for Apollo 11, which landed 2 humans on the lunar surface. The Apollo 10 astronauts flew to the Moon in a command module. However, 2 of the crew members also rode in the lunar module, allowing them to drop down to less than 10 miles above the Moon's surface. Since they managed to approach our natural satellite so closely, could they have heard something coming from the lunar surface? Well, apparently not. It turns out that the creepy whistling sound was nothing more than some interference between the VHF radios on the 2 different vehicles. Interestingly enough, Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins later wrote in his book, Carrying the Fire*, that NASA technicians had warned him about the whistling. He also mentioned that if he hadn't known about the origins of this music, it would have scared him to no end. In 2008, NASA shared the transcripts of the Apollo 10 transmission, but according to the documents, they were declassified in 1982. In 2012, NASA also shared the audio files online. If you listen to these files, you'll hear that the astronauts sound genuinely odd and puzzled by what they hear. Moreover, they bring it up over and over again. It's also worth mentioning that you never actually feel that the 3 men were panicked or alarmed while going over the transcript or the audio. Some sources put particular emphasis on the fact that the space music started when the astronauts were over the far side of the Moon, where they didn't have radio or visual contact with Mission Control for about an hour, something that had been expected. Some documentaries used this moment to create tension, saying things like the astronauts were on their own, no one on Earth could see or hear them. However, the narrators never explained why the astronauts' isolation could have been such a significant factor. By no means was it connected to the mysterious sounds themselves. There's another interesting element to this story that we should consider. It's the fact that the Apollo 10 astronauts never discussed this incident and these sounds publicly. However, it's still unclear whether they talked about it with NASA engineers. This makes some people speculate that the astronauts didn't want to project anything but a rock-hard psyche. Showing a drop of confidence even once during the whole mission could have left them out of the entire project. Hi, my name is Martin. I am the author of this channel, and today I'll tell you all about the evidence of astronauts meeting unidentified things at the time of observation. It's the year 1962. An American astronaut, John Glenn, is orbiting Earth in his Friendship 7 capsule on the Mercury Atlas 6 flight. He looks out of the window and sees fireflies. Well, maybe those are not fireflies, but he clearly sees some weird bright specks clustered around the ship. Unsurprisingly, he tries to find a logical explanation. Could they be ice crystals from the spacecraft's hydrogen peroxide attitude control rockets? But Glenn is unable to correlate their appearance with the use of the rockets. The mystery remains unsolved. Only much later will we find out what those fireflies were. You see, spaceships tend to accumulate clouds of debris and contamination around themselves. When Glenn's rocket sprayed jets of crystals, many of these crystals accumulated in the cloud. They reflected sunlight and interacted with other gases, looking like tiny sparkles. The case of the mysterious fireflies is now officially solved, but it isn't the darkest space tale. One of the most famous cases of seeing bizarre stuff in space comes from Apollo 11. That's when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins noticed a UFO pacing along with them during their flight to the moon. Here's how the astronauts described this incident: "We did watch a slow blinking light some substantial distance away from us. There was something out there close enough to be observed. The period of uncertainty was rather brief. The astronauts and ground control soon identified the object. It was one of the 4 adapter panels that fit between the 3rd stage and the lunar module. These panels were ejected from the 3rd stage, and one of them continued along the same trajectory as the lunar module with the crew. While moving, it rotated and blinked when sunlight was reflected off its surface." Another famous and truly creepy picture hinting at the presence of alien life on the moon was taken by the crew of Apollo 16. As the astronauts were leaving our natural satellite, they made a video, and 4 seconds of it showed a near-perfect Hollywood flying saucer leaving behind a plasma trail. For more than 30 years, enthusiasts used this video to prove that aliens had paid us a visit. But then scientists decided to take the matter into their own hands. They realized that when viewed from the window through which the video had been taken, the object in the film was actually consistent with a small floodlight sticking out from the side of the capsule on a boom. Looked at from this angle, the floodlight looks exactly like a flying saucer, and the boom indeed looks like that plasma trail. And do you see this? Those are a couple of bolts on the boom. Another report that inspired UFO enthusiasts came from Gemini 7. Astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell were making what was called a football maneuver. It was supposed to get them into a position where they would make recurring close approaches with their Titan II booster stage every orbit. But when they were performing this maneuver, Borman reported, "Bogey at 10 o'clock high. We have several, looks like debris up here, actual sighting. We also have the booster in sight. Yeah, have very, very many, look like hundreds of little particles banked on the left, out about 3 to 4 miles. It looks like a path to the vehicle at 90 degrees. They are past now. They were in polar orbit." Lovell claimed that the booster was in sight too, slowly tumbling along with the debris cloud. Does it mean that Borman's bogey particles couldn't have been the booster or booster debris after all? They were moving in a different direction, traveling along a different trajectory. Well, not necessarily. Later analysis showed that those particles were ice flakes from leftover fuel from the Titan II. As you can see, astronauts often report seeing weird stuff out there, but NASA's reaction is often anticlimactic. Let's have a look at how they commented on the statements of an astronaut who claimed to have witnessed alien presence in space. NASA doesn't track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up of alien life on this planet or anywhere else in the universe. We should also remember that unidentified doesn't necessarily mean positively identified as an alien spacecraft. There's a lot of objects in orbit, and a lot of stuff travels along with every mission, so we'll always have UFO reports as long as we have space programs. Imagine living in a world where technology has reached its highest point. Your daily routines are orchestrated by an AI, which anticipates your every need, from brewing your morning coffee to selecting a perfect evening outfit. The cityscape outside the window of your floating home is a marvel of efficiency. Flying pods whisk people to their destinations. Renewable energy sources power the giant megacity, creating an environment of pristine streets and clean air. At work, you have online meetings with colleagues living across galaxies, collaborating on projects that go beyond our current understanding. It sounds like a sci-fi story, but some extraterrestrial civilizations might have already reached this level of development.